All right, well, thanks so much, everybody, for coming out today, and thanks to everyone on Zoom. So I'm going to talk about my Capstone project. It's called the Benedict Option. It's a communal liturgical prayer app. All right, so my overview for my presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about why I would build a social liturgical prayer app. I'm going to show a little bit of what the app is. Then I'll get into my research areas and my process for coming to this project. I'm going to talk about how I implemented it, the story behind that. I'll give a brief demo, and then some concluding thoughts. So, why liturgical prayer app? In our Sattler Christian Ethics for the Digital Age class, we read a book called Transhumanism and the Image of God. And this book talks a lot about getting us to think about how today's technology, how that influences us as Christians, and especially as we think about being made in the image of God when we're using technology, how does that affect us? And so in the book, he quotes James K. Smith. He talks a lot about liturgies, and so he says, he defines liturgy as, liturgies are ritual practices that function as pedagogies of ultimate desire. And so what Schatzer argues in this book then is that our usage of today's technologies like smartphones forms new liturgies that shape our desire. And they essentially have the ability to change and shape our thinking. And so this is a stirring quote from Schatzer. So he says, "We will be formed. The question is, what liturgies will form us? Without reflection and practice, we will all too easily find ourselves subject to the wrong liturgies in the wrong stories, technology story and transhumanism story. But if we turn to Christian themes and practices, even as we use advanced technology, we give ourselves the chance to be formed by a more powerful liturgy." And so that really inspired me. So I thought, instead of a liturgy of TikTok and Instagram, how could we maybe help today's young people, myself, create a liturgy that promotes our love of the things above? And how can we use this advanced technology to our advantage? So enter Benedict Option, a communal liturgical prayer app. So at its heart, it is an app to promote engaging with liturgical and devotional prayers and psalms. It's designed around this idea of sort of a micro social media. It's designed to be used in small groups. Users can interact and engage with each other in similar prayers and live video chat praying. They also can share their thoughts and reflections on prayers and engage with them in a social media-like feed. Most of all, it's providing the ability to easily access these liturgical prayers. So some of the key features and user needs I tried to address was having a variety of prayers. There's a lot of apps out there. Some of them may not have that much variety. So right now I only have Psalms, but would eventually like to incorporate things like the Book of Common Prayer, some Anabaptist sources like the Osbun. Wanted to also integrate social interaction, being able to share insights about what you thought about maybe your prayer you recently prayed. And then the live connection is, I think, important, as a liturgy is often practiced in a communal way, so how can we try to replicate that online? Saving settings is an important feature, and then the social feed that we're used to seeing recent activity, and also the ability to form multiple groups, as many of us are in different stratas of communities and such. So here is the main interface. So at the top left, we have a button here that you can do some searching for different liturgies. I've also, going a little bit down, the box on the left there is, I've implementing some feature here where you can select different preferences for the type of liturgies you're wanting to look at. At the bottom then is how you navigate through the different liturgies in the database. You can go consecutively through them. There's also a button there in the middle to just select a random liturgy. And then at the top right of the box there, we have a ability to favorite, save a liturgy you might really enjoy. There we also then have a little bit above that ability to switch different groups. And at the very top then, I have a a setting that allows us to select liturgies based on like how long they would take to pray. So starting at 1 minute for today's very limited attention spans. So myself included. All right, so here is just then when you click on the search liturgy, this box pops up. You can search phrases. We also have an advanced search feature. Of course, there's an account management. You can log in, save your settings. And so this is a in development feature, but this video feature, I used an open source tool called Jitsi. And so this allows you to basically pipe in this software running in the web into your own web app. And so what it allows us to do, as you can see, two very happy users praying together. So it allows you then to enable this social praying feature. This is also a little bit in development, but our social feed, allowing recent comments and about the prayers. I also plan to incorporate another another open source tool for this called Bootcamp that will help me build out this feed. All right, so that is the app. So I'm going to get a little bit into the research process and how I got to this. I focused on 3 different areas. First, decentralized social media. Some recent Wall Street Journal articles they recently exposed like some kind of shady practices of Facebook and their product design. So that kind of got me thinking, how could we make it better? I looked into this note-taking technique called Zettelkasten, which is it focuses on this idea of how we can process our information we learn and capture better, and also how we can share it with others. And my final tracing the research trail ended in mentorship and the Benedict Option topic. And so there I was comparing my community experience from the Hutterite colony to my community experience here in the city. And so I was trying to figure out how we can use software to create more connection throughout the day. Overall, throughout all these sort of somewhat different topics, my guiding theme has always been looking at how we can have more deep and meaningful experiences in the online world. So starting with decentralized media, once again, it was a book we read in our digital ethics class called Surveillance Capitalism. This book highlights some of these shady design practices of big tech. For example, the book shows that many of these large companies have proven that they can track user behavior and actually use that to manipulate them towards certain decisions. So whether that be buying a certain pair of shoes or thinking a certain thought, they technically have the ability to do this. And so I then dove into the other kind of problems that social media has today. There's a lot of talk around censorship, privacy, the addiction to it, and then this aspect of power and control. So some of the areas and people that are trying to address these problems, there's actually a lot of work being done in this. On the right, we have these 2 different charts of protocols that are being developed to try to think of new ways of how the whole engines of social media work. Twitter actually has a whole team devoted to working on this problem, and they call it the Blue Sky team. My conclusion with that research was it was way too big of a scope of a problem. It was very difficult for individual student to contribute. In fact, Elon Musk thought it was worth $44 billion to try to address this problem. So very fascinating problem, though. I'm going to be continuing to research it into the years and try to figure out ways that I can maybe contribute. On the right here, these are different ideas of how we can try to organize the control of who's controlling the network, who has the say over what content is on there, who's on there. So these are different theories of how we can think about that. So that led me then to trying to narrow in a little bit with this Zettelkasten note-taking technique. So the Zettelkasten note-taking technique is a robust knowledge management solution invented by this German sociologist named Nicholas Luhmann. He used this technique to publish 58 books in a 30-year time frame. This quote from him famously is, "I only do what is easy. I only write when I immediately know how to do it. If I falter for a moment, I put the matter aside and do something else." So that's how he talked about writing 58 books. Definitely, there's something in that technique that I was trying to uncover. So there's actually many companies that are now trying to take his technique and create a digital version of it. He did it in an analog system. This was back in the 60s. At a high level, the process is essentially when you're reading something, researching, you just quickly capture that, write down that in your own words, elaborate it. So don't just quote, write exactly what the author's saying. Like, there's a place for that, but this is trying to get you to do your own thinking on a topic. And then what you do is, so you capture a note, you then try to, every note must be connected to something else in your note-taking system. And so this creates these interesting chains, and what he called it was inward growth. And so basically what this allows for then is multiple hierarchies in your note-taking database. So traditionally, say things like Microsoft Word, file systems, and Evernote, there's a very strict hierarchy. But this basically is like, hey, you can have multiple hierarchies. And basically the point of that is that it will lead you to interesting insights and discoveries that you would not have made otherwise in your database. So why I researched that, my hypothesis and what I was hoping was that we could use some of this technique for deeper and more meaningful social media interactions, and that people could use this to improve the critical thinking, processing info, in the hopes of sharing deeper content online. So I looked at some digital implementations of this tool. Some of them, the one on the right that actually Zach mentioned, Obsidian is one example. There's other companies called Rome Research, to name a few. Unfortunately, though, none of them really actually did a great job of implementing this man's method due to differing philosophies of how the method should be implemented. So what I identified then were two interesting needs in this area. So the one was most of them lacked good ways of socially sharing this knowledge with other users, and they did not also have a good way of publishing the data. So I was hoping to build off of some of these open source platforms that are using this technology, but once again there I was realizing that I would need to totally start from scratch because the existing projects wouldn't work with that. So that led me now to the mentoring and the Benedict option. So the area I got interested in was in improving our sharing of knowledge. So I specifically looked at my own past experiences in my own home community and started thinking about how could we have better tools to capture and share knowledge of like, say, Hutterite community life. This problem proved to be more of an anthropological problem and not as much computer science related. However, my experience with the Hutterite community and my experience with the Boston community, that experience kind of showed me that experience kind of highlighted for me what I was missing was sort of the daily serendipitous interactions. And so part of why I created this app was in hopes of trying to foster more of that in a digital context. I was also reading the book, The Benedict Option at the time, and his emphasis throughout the book is on forming a tight-knit community, grounded in prayer and scripture to help us avoid some of the evils of our day. And so one of Rob Dreher's key points was practicing liturgies. And so that then, along with this book that we read in Digital Ethics, became the inspiration for my app, calling it Benedict Option. So the goal is, to foster liturgical prayer in our busy lives. And so there's some of the user needs identified. I already mentioned some of those. Some of the existing solutions, I don't know if any of you have seen these. On the left, there's one called the 1 Minute Pause app. This was This app encourages users to take a break throughout the day and just connect with God, giving your cares to God. I've actually used this quite a bit, especially during final periods in Sattler. I really actually love it, but there's very few prayer options, and there's not a lot of social features. Another example, this is called the Daily Office, and this is a digital version of the Book of Common Prayer. And this was a little closer to my aims of my project. It has more social features. It's designed to sort of share your settings with other people so that you're reading the same kind of schedule of prayers. But it didn't do well at sort of this, it didn't have like the video features and so on. So that is summarizes my research. I'm going to now then talk about my implementation of how I went and built the Liturgical prayer app. So I built a full stack web app, and full stack basically means that is an application that has a front end and a back end. So in this chart, the front end is at the top. That's what you see when you actually load the website. The back end is all the brains of the operation that you won't ever see unless you're the one coding it. And so it results in two very different kinds of coding. The technology I used was a Django web app. And so why would I do a Django web app? Well, as Django says on their website, Django is the web framework for perfectionists with deadlines. So that's me. So that's it's a really cool tool, and it's really easy to get up and running with stuff, and so that's why I picked it. The other thing is a web app allows it to be used on pretty much any device. You can technically load it on a phone. Here's an overview of the different coding languages and technologies I use. So on the back end, I used Python and the Django framework. I used some development tools like GitHub and VS Code. So VS Code is great for doing debugging. So there's lots of debugging going on when you're trying to fix problems. GitHub is great for saving versions of your code so that when you add a new feature, if you break something, you can go back and see what actually you broke. I used a handful of front-end library languages, HTML5, CSS. Bootstrap, that was a really fun one. It took me a while to figure that one out, but it's a whole library that allows you to basically do CSS very easily. And then, of course, JavaScript, which is used for animating buttons and stuff like that on the web app. Don't forget Google. This project would not have been possible without Google. I can tell you how many times I was basically ready to give up the project and decided, okay, I will Google my problem. And sure enough, waiting for me in Stack Overflow was the answer to my problem. So it's an essential skill, and it's very handy. So here's an example. I don't know, it's not showing up very clear, unfortunately. Here's an example of the back-end code. And so the back-end is where all the data is stored, all the features like loading the prayers and liturgies up to the users. It's also where storing the user information happens. So you can see a little sneak peek there. Here's an example of the front-end code. This is what creates the experiences that let users know what's happening when they click on a button or something like that. As you can see, there's an example from the app. So that was made with HTML and JavaScript. So when you click on that, it will then load a prayer of length 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, etc. All right, so a quick demo. So I will load us up here. I'm going to log in to my account. And what I'd like us to do is just pray a short psalm, Psalm 117. So I will go to that, navigate through here. All right, here we go. So let's go ahead and pray this together. Oh, praise the Lord, all ye nations. Praise him, all ye people. For his merciful kindness is great toward us, and the truth of the Lord endures forever. Praise ye the Lord. All right, I'm noticing that I'm not sharing my screen on Zoom, unfortunately. Sorry there. So basically you can see here the different navigation. Okay, you should see that now. So I can also then click to just load a random liturgy, and so on. Here you can click on different length prayers. Psalm 23, take about 3 minutes to pray. So that's the demo. So some final thoughts and conclusions. So the connection to my spiritual life with this project started out of a deeper desire to develop a lifestyle of prayer and connection with God. Part of my goal is to limit technology's ability to distract me from God and instead use it to help me focus on Him. So that's part of what I did with this project, I was hoping to do. Connection to Sattler classes, there's different classes and skills that I gathered in Sattler classes in general, like problem solving and debugging, things like our algorithms class, computer systems, program design. Did a lot of debugging in the computer systems class. So there are just some of the other ones, object-oriented, Python programming, and so on. Connection to my future career, I'm hoping to get into software engineering, and there's a lot of roles to do full stack development. And so this project would directly prepare me to do that in the future. Specifically even Python Django jobs. So here's an example. This one's asking for 7 years experience, but you can see the salary is like up to $180,000. So it's a valuable skill. It's in demand. So if you can learn this, right now I have 1 year experience. So we'll keep adding to get up there. And also I'm hoping to pursue like open source development. And so just working with some of these open source libraries was exciting. And then finally, last point here, the future development and some of the features to add. So it's like currently in beta, there's still rough edges and things that aren't completely working. But after some testing with users, seeing what kind of things people really actually want and need, I'm hoping to deploy it to Heroku, which is a way to basically let anybody access this app. I'd like to make some refinements to the UI for a little bit more of an elegant design, try to reflect some of the more the style and design of more, maybe even cathedrals, if possible. I'd like to continue to add more prayer resources, things like the Osbund, Anabaptist resources, etc. And also I'd like the ability to compile and share your prayer insights in a PDF form. So this gets to some of that Zettelkasten feature there. And finally, I think most importantly, I would love to do is to make a mobile web app version. So there you have it. That is my project I put together, and thank you for listening.